She opened the folder, read 5 names linked to Jeffrey Epstein, and, within 10 minutes, the White House cut the cameras. The president walked out. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She simply read the truth. You ever witness one of those rare moments on live television where everything freezes, not because of shouting? Not because of theatrics, but because someone drops a truth so sharp, so specific, that it slices straight through the script. That's what happened 3 Tuesdays ago, during what was supposed to be a routine House oversight hearing in Washington, D.C. The committee was questioning mid-level officials about federal agencies spending dry. Procedural stuff, but Jasmine Crockett came in differently, calm, controlled, no bold colors, no media baiting. Just steady composure and a voice that cut through the usual noise. She adjusted the mic, leaned in. What I'm about to read into the record, she began, comes directly from declassified files released 2 weeks ago. Inside that file, names, Epstein's travel manifests. 5 individuals, 2 of whom currently held senior positions in the Trump administration. The room froze. You could hear a pen click to Rose back. Across town, in the Roosevelt Room of the White House, President Trump was mid-briefing. But when Crockett started speaking, the room and his attention shifted. Nobody expected it. Not from her. Not here. Not now. But Jasmine didn't blink. She pulled out a packet of documents, highlighted, time-stamped, cataloged. "I'd like to enter these into the record," she said. "Flight logs from 2001, 2005, and 2007, sign-in sheets from Epstein's Manhattan townhouse, cross-referenced against Secret Service access logs from the last 12 months. That's when things started moving. Representative Langley, a Republican from Iowa, stiffened in his seat. Staffers by the door exchanged quick glances. Phones lit up. A C-SPAN. Producer whispered to the control room, "Stay on Crockett. Just stay with her." Viewers at home grabbed their phones. Twitter threads exploded. TikTok clips hit 1 million views before the hour was up. Back at the White House, 2 sources say Trump turned to his chief of staff and asked flatly, "How the hell did this get out?" The chief of staff didn't answer, just stared at the screen. Because Jasmine was still going. She read the names, no drama, no performance, just a steady surgical readout of facts. One was a deputy at the Department of Energy, another, a senior advisor on international development. A third, recently nominated for a federal judgeship. Each name came with a flight date, an address, a surveillance still pulled from archived footage. She let the silence do the rest, and that's why. 20 minutes later, a White House aide was seen rushing from the Capitol, note in hand. And why Trump's press event that day was abruptly canceled with no explanation. People weren't even sure what they had just witnessed, only that the ground had shifted. Jasmine hadn't accused anyone. She hadn't editorialized. She had simply read what had always been there, buried in plain sight. But she wasn't done. She opened a second folder, thinner, more specific. She paused, glanced across the room, then locked eyes with Representative Clay Barron, a Texas Republican whose campaign posters always featured him in front of a flag or a church. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter the following into the record." No one objected at first, but Barron's posture changed. "These are internal White House logs," she continued, "from July of this year. They documented a closed-door meeting involving 4 senior SOM officials, a man named Lawrence Trent. The name rang no bells for the public, but to those who had followed the Epstein investigation closely, it was a red flag. Trent wasn't famous. He wasn't even listed in most reports. But in sealed testimonies and leaked logs, he kept showing up in background roles, near suspicious events, always adjacent to something rotten. He wasn't on the original visitor list, Crockett said. but he appears on the final clearance. Log, no photo. No reason for the visit. Just a redacted escort name and a 47-minute window. She paused. Let the words sink in. That meeting occurred 3 weeks after Trent wired $200,000 to the American Strategic Futures Fund, a super PAC with direct ties to 2 current judicial advisors. That was the moment Representative Barron snapped. I'm going to stop you right there, Congresswoman, but it was too late. The facts were on record. The room was listening, and Jasmine Crockett. She was just getting started. His voice rose just enough to sound offended, just enough to suggest control was slipping. These are serious accusations. Representative Barron snapped. Mr. Trent is a private citizen. We don't drag private citizens into congressional hearings. Without warning, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. I'm not accusing him of anything, she said, her voice measured. I'm reading verified records. That's a problem. Perhaps we should ask who approved his access. The air shifted. Viewers watching from home could feel it tevin through the screen. This wasn't theater. She wasn't pointing fingers. She was tracing a pattern. Behind her, an aide slid a colored photo onto the table dated 2012. Lawrence Trent, seated at a private fundraiser directly beside Jeffrey Epstein. She didn't hold it up. She didn't need to. I'm not saying this proves anything, she continued. But I do think the American people deserve to know why a man with known Epstein ties entered the White House without appearing on the official visitor log, and why. Days later, money from his account landed in PACs currently influencing judicial nominations. That landed hard. Even Representative Gina Moralza, moderate Republican from Arizona, leaned in. Congresswoman Ruza, she asked carefully, are you suggesting judicial nominees are being influenced by individuals connected to Epstein's network? I'm not alleging anything, Jasmine replied. I'm presenting a pattern and asking why no one else seems to be. The ripple effect was instant. People watching from home began Googling Lawrence Trent. Within an hour, his name topped trending charts. Reddit threads popped up, piecing together timelines. TikTok creators stitched hearing clips with old interviews and photos from the island and across the Capitol. A staffer for Senator Royce Eden Long, regarded as a bipartisan leader on justice reform, was already drafting a statement to distance Eden from the Strategic Futures Fund, just in case. Back in the chamber, Representative Barron shifted again, tightening his tie. This hearing is supposed to be about institutional efficiency, he said. It still is, Jasmine replied smoothly. If institutions are accepting money from men connected to sex trafficking investigations, I'd say that directly affects efficiency. Wouldn't you? Silence. He had no response, and then, without missing a beat, she pivoted. I'd also like to enter into the record this internal memo, she said, lifting a folded document dated August 4th, from a former Department of Labor official. She paused just long enough for the camera to catch the bold red stamp on the cover, resigned. The memo stated the official was pressured to ignore flagged transactions offshore, payments tied to the same network. It wasn't the content that caused the stir. It was the implication. Someone inside the system had seen the signs and walked away, but Jasmine wasn't done. What came next went beyond influence, beyond money. It reached into proximity, how close Epstein's legacy still lurked near power. She opened her third folder, and the room chilled. It wasn't the temperature, it was the stillness. No shuffling papers, no side whispers. Even the stenographer's fingers hesitated, uncertain if she was recording a hearing or witnessing history. Jasmine took a sip of water. No drama, just pace. Then she looked up. 3 days before Mr. Trent's White House visit, she said, a private jet left Teterboro bound for Palm Beach. She paused. The manifest recently leaked and authenticated lists to passengers. Lawrence Trent and a man named R. Delaney. The name hadn't surfaced before. The room held its breath. R. Delaney, Jasmine continued, is believed to be a pseudonym for Robert Dillon, currently serving as Assistant Director of Policy Implementation. She let the room sit in it. That alias has appeared on 3 domestic flights in the past year, all overlapping with visits to properties formerly owned or frequented by Epstein's known affiliates. Online, the buzz exploded. Robert Dillon, the man who stood just behind President Trump during every border security briefing, the one credited with drafting portions of the education budget, the one no one ever noticed till now, and Jasmine. She calmly turned to the final page in her folder. Inside the hearing room, a low rustle moved through the gallery. Not even shock, just confusion. Because the names Jasmine had just read weren't relics from past scandals or forgotten bureaucrats. They were tied to power now. Representative Lois Hanley, a centrist Democrat known for her caution, leaned forward. "Are you alleging Mr. Dillon traveled under a false name to avoid detection?" she asked carefully. Jasmine didn't blink. "I'm not alleging," she said. "I'm presenting documentation. If the committee wants to subpoena flight records from Gulfline Charter Services, I'm confident the pattern will hold." No one laughed. No one scoffed. Just silence. Representative Barron glanced toward a staffer in the corner and gave a subtle shake of his head. "Don't move. Don't speak." But Jasmine wasn't finished. She flipped to another page and held up a printed image, time-stamped, satellite tagged, showing a Gulfline jet parked on a private airstrip, less than a mile from an estate once owned by an Epstein associate who died under sealed circumstances in 2019, and then she delivered the line that stuck. "If this were a single trip, maybe it could be dismissed. But it's not. These are repeated flights, overlapping names, shared financial pipelines, meetings with no minutes, access granted without clearance." She tapped the folder in front of her. Same donors, same advisors, same shield of silence. Representative Morales, still visibly shaken, spoke almost in a whisper. "How did you get all this?" Jasmine didn't look smug. She looked tired. "I stopped waiting for someone else to bring it up," she said. That line landed like a punch. Not just in the room, online, 2 timelines lit up. Posts flooded in. "She's the only adult in the room. This wasn't supposed to happen today. Someone finally said it." And then, from the far end of the panel, came a voice. No one expected Representative Henry Brighton, a veteran Republican from Indiana. "I served on this committee when the Epstein case first broke," he said, voice low but clear. "Back when people swore it wasn't about politics, it was about power. If these documents are real, then we have to follow it." Party be damned. Gasps rippled. Brighton had never broken ranks publicly. He didn't say more, just folded his hands. But that was enough. It cracked the line. Within minutes, the press pool outside erupted. Reporters scrambled to rewrite headlines. Studio producers made calls mid-show. You could feel the ripple hit newsrooms across the country. Inside, Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once. She simply closed the folder, pushed it aside, and reached for the last one, and that is when the nerves in Washington really began to fray. 15 minutes later, inside the Roosevelt Room, calm had fractured. President Trump had been seated at the head of the long wooden table, surrounded by 2 federal judges he planned to endorse later that week and his top national security officials. He'd been in good spirit, stalking polling numbers and energy optics. Then an aide, casually flipping channels during a break, landed on the hearing right as the camera zoomed in on Jasmine Crockett's face. At first, Trump waved it off. Then he heard the name, Robert Dillon. He leaned forward. "What did she just say?" he asked. Silence. On screen, Jasmine was now showing satellite photos, manifest records, dates. She wasn't speculating. She wasn't circling. She was stating facts. Trump pushed his notes aside and raised the volume himself. "You're telling me judiciary didn't clear this hearing?" He snapped at his chief counsel. "You're telling me no one flagged this?" No response. Jasmine kept going unshaken. She was naming individuals Trump had promoted. She was drawing straight lines to a name almost no one dared utter aloud anymore. Epstein. Trump's jaw locked. He turned to a press aide. "Call Langley, now." But Clay Barron's office didn't pick up. Outside the room, a Secret Service agent was seen speaking urgently into his earpiece. Pacing by the door, inside, one of the judges waiting for her endorsement nervously adjusted her blazer. She whispered to her colleague, who calmly packed his notes. They weren't staying. Trump stood abruptly. "I'm done here." "But Mr. President, we still have the final." I said, "I'm done." One aide followed him. Another tried calling the press office. Straight to voicemail. By the time Trump reached the Oval Office, Jasmine's segment had already been clipped, watermarked, and posted across every major platform. CNN's Chiron Reed. Explosive Epstein link allegations rock hearing MSNBC. Cut to a legal panel. Fox News went into emergency editorial review. The country wasn't just watching anymore. It was choosing sides. Even Fox News wasn't spinning. No defense, no attack. Just silence. Waiting, one of Trump's aides handed him a printed sheet. Tweets from conservative donors asking if the names Jasmine Crockett had read aloud were real. A few weren't, even denying it. They were asking the real question: who gave her that? Trump said nothing. He read the page slowly, then crumpled it in his hand. Back at the Capitol, Jasmine was still speaking, this time about irregularities in campaign donations. But inside the West Wing, the priorities had already shifted. According to a senior advisor speaking on condition of anonymity, a strategist leaned toward the chief of staff and asked bluntly, "Do we need to worry about criminal liability?" The response came instantly. "Only if someone flips." That phrase changed everything. Until that moment, the strategy had been simple. Ignore, dismiss, let it blow over. But Jasmine wasn't bluffing. She had documents, flight logs, names, wire transfers. She wasn't speculating. She was showing the math. And she was still seated at that table like she had nowhere better to be. By 3:40 p.m., Trump had canceled his scheduled 4 p.m. press statement. By 4:10, his staff had begun drafting a written response denying any connection between his administration and any convicted criminal. The language shifted with each version. One draft called Jasmine a grandstander. Another claimed the donations were non-affiliated. None of it felt credible. Meanwhile, inside Jasmine's office, her team watched the live feed. Number? Celebration. No tweets, no press calls. They kept going through files. They weren't expecting praise. They were preparing for retaliation. And across town, a man who once believed he could control every headline was watching the narrative slip away. But what no one in that room knew, yet not Trump, not the GOP, not even the reporters breathlessly tracking every update, was this: Jasmine had something far more damaging than donor names or dollar signs. 36 hours after the hearing, the country was still trying to make sense of what it had seen. But Jasmine's team wasn't done. They'd spent months combing through hundreds of financial disclosures, nonprofit filings, dark money pathways, and PAC contributions. And now, she had the thread that pulled it all together, not just who met with Epstein's circle, but who benefited. When the next hearing opened, there was no fanfare, no headlines. Just a question, "Mr. Chairman," Jasmine said. "Can someone from the Office of Government Ethics explain why a donor flagged by FinCEN was allowed to contribute over $1.20? million to the American Strategic Futures Fund between April and September. The room froze. She held up the form verified, not anonymous. The funds traced back to a chain of wire transfers from a limited partnership in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That partnership, Southern Nest Capital, partially owned by Elliot Frayne. That name rang faintly. But it wasn't obscure. Frayne was Epstein's former broker, known fixer, never indicted, always lurking near the edge of Epstein's most complex financial webs. Disappeared from public view in 2011. Jasmine continued. Frayne's involvement predates this administration. But what matters is this: since 2018, shell entities tied to him have funneled money not only to that PAC, but also to two legal advocacy groups actively lobbying for weaker financial oversight. She paused just long enough for phones to come out. Frayne's name started trending within minutes. Now, Jasmine said, you're probably wondering what that has to do with the White House. Here's the connection. The individual who approved that PAC's operations, who greenlit its 2023 expansion clauses, a former Frayne associate. He now serves as Deputy Director of Strategic Affairs. She let that settle. He signed off on the fund's expansion just 5 weeks before it hosted a private event in Clearwater, Florida. At that event, 3 federal judges, 1 cabinet member, a former attorney general. No press, no transcript, no official schedule. Then Jasmine held up another document set. We only know about this meeting because of a whistleblower who submitted these reservation records anonymously. No one in the chamber breathed. No one on the live stream blinked. And somewhere in the West Wing, Trump's press office realized they weren't spinning their way out of this one. Clay Barron leaned forward again. His voice cracked as he asked, "Are you accusing that PAC of funneling Epstein money into judicial campaigns?" Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't blink. "I'm not accusing," she said. "I'm connecting dots. The money moved. People benefited. And the decisions that followed matched the interests of those donors, not the public." Congresswoman Morales spoke next, her tone cautious. "Have these documents been verified?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes, the wire logs match FinCEN's red flag database. The emails were independently authenticated, and the whistleblower provided internal memos, some outlining talking points from those private meetings. One memo specifically mentions shielding, problematic legacy affiliations. Those last 3 words, problematic legacy affiliations, hung in the air like smoke. Translation, Epstein, and everyone who'd ever been close to him. The viewers at home weren't hearing legal jargon. They were hearing cover-up. And Jasmine was nowhere near done. She unfolded one last page, single printout. A list of bundled donations sent over. For months, each one kept just under the $200,000 reporting threshold. Each from a different LLC, but all traced back to the same virtual address, Henderson, Nevada. A UPS store. Jasmine looked around the room. You ever seen 5 corporations operating out of a mailbox? There were nervous chuckles. Everyone in the chamber understood what that meant. That wasn't lobbying. That wasn't free political speech. That was money laundering. Even Republican staffers started texting furiously. Jasmine turned to the chairman. "Let me ask the panel this: if we have credible evidence of dark money connected to a sex trafficking network reaching into judicial nominations, how do we justify calling this a partisan issue?" No one answered, because the answer wasn't one anyone wanted to say out loud. That clip, her question racked. Up 2.7 million views within hours, and outside Capitol Hill, a handful of reporters began doing what they hadn't before, comparing Jasmine's evidence with campaign filings from 2020 through 2024. The overlaps were impossible to ignore. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a one-time check. It was a pipeline. But Jasmine wasn't just interested in showing who got paid. Now, She was ready to show what that money bought by the next morning. Conservative media had their orders. The headlines came fast. Crockett Circus. Democrat smears innocent officials, baseless, dangerous conspiracy theories. What is Jasmine Crockett really after? Selective outrage. Why she won't name Clinton's ties, it didn't matter that. The documents were real. It didn't matter that some names she'd read aloud had already appeared in public financial disclosures. The goal was clear. Discredit her, quickly, thoroughly. Before the story caught fire, talking points began circulating through Capitol Hill. By noon, staffers were told to say she misrepresented her sources, recycled debunked claims, was exploiting tragedy for political gain. What they didn't say was just as telling. They didn't deny the money. They didn't challenge the connections to known Epstein associates. They just called it reckless. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. No rage posts, no fiery sound bites, no victory lap. She went silent because she knew what was coming. That night, she appeared on a small local news station in Dallas. Not CNN, not MSNBC, just a plain chair. No makeup, her glasses on. They're calling it political, she said quietly, because they have nothing else to call it. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking why these names and transactions keep showing up and why nobody seems to care. That clip was shared over 1 million times in 24 hours, and cracks started to show. One of the officials, Jasmine had names still active in the Department of Commerce, suddenly went. Jasmine's calm demeanor made her a harder target. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't angry. She was composed, measured, more like a litigator cross-examining a hostile witness than a politician chasing camera time. Then the story took a sharp turn. NBC broke the update. A source inside the Treasury Department, speaking anonymously, confirmed that 3 of the donations Jasmine had flagged were previously red flagged last year. The Treasury had requested a follow-up investigation. And then nothing. The case had gone cold. Quietly, just like that, the public mood shifted. What was dismissed as reckless on Tuesday became worthy of investigation by Friday. But Jasmine didn't change. No press frenzy, no calls for resignation, no victory laps. She stayed focused. On Sunday morning, during a nationally aired interview, she was asked if she believed the president knew about the money trail. Jasmine paused. I think he knows enough to be nervous, she said. And if he doesn't, the people around him definitely do. You don't cancel briefings and go silent unless something hit too close. That single sentence detonated. It became the most quoted line of the day, spliced into clips of Trump walking off camera mid-briefing. Late-night shows picked it up. International media ran with it. Even former intelligence officials, some active, some retired, began asking publicly, why hasn't the administration launched an internal audit yet? Still, Jasmine hadn't revealed everything. She hadn't touched the whistleblower documents. While the public was catching up, while headlines scrambled to keep pace, Jasmine's team received a package. No return address, no name. Just a worn manila envelope labeled for committee eyes only. Inside, 3 USB drives, a 6-page memo in Courier font, an annotated map of a luxury compound outside Sarasota, Florida. At first glance, it didn't look like much. When they played the first audio file, the temperature in the room shifted. It began with static, then shuffling. A low male voice said, "Phone's off. No photos. No transcripts. We keep this tight." The voice wasn't anonymous. It was Ernest Vick. He wasn't famous, but inside Washington, everyone knew him. Former legal counsel to administrations. Current policy advisor, quietly influential on immigration and defense contracts. Never in the spotlight, always in the room. And now, caught on tape, laying out how to contain what he called Epstein residual fallout. Jasmine's aide hit pause, silence. They rewound and replayed one section minute 2. "We can't let Crockett drag this out," Vic said. "The donors are getting nervous. She's already got enough to spook the ones who were on the island back in '06. If she connects Frame to strategic futures, the hill will burn. We need to bury this. Get to Langley and Eden. Lock it down." It wasn't vague. It was a strategy. Someone tied to current administration officials had participated in a closed-door meeting to suppress evidence tied to Epstein's network, specifically because Jasmine was getting close. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was damage control caught in real time. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She wasn't surprised, just tired. The accompanying memo was worse. It detailed the meeting, 6 attendees, a sitting federal judge, an undersecretary from the Department of Education, an unnamed White House security liaison. The language wasn't legal. It was coded. Bullet points included phrases like, "Push narrative through Daily Patriot target Crockett's credibility. Float leak blaming Dems for Epstein delays. If Strategic Futures Fund leaks pivot to Soros angle." It was a playbook. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She alerted her legal counsel, then submitted the materials to the Oversight Committee's secure archive. Let them verify the audio. Let them trace the sources. But she knew this wasn't about verification. It was about the public. The next morning, Jasmine's team quietly leaked a single clip to a reporter from the Clarion-Ledora, Mississippi outlet known for caution and rigor. Within hours, it exploded. The quote, "If she connects Frame to strategic futures, the hill will burn." That line lit up the internet. And for once, the spin machine couldn't keep up. The reaction didn't break along partisan lines. Some Republicans tried to discredit the leak, calling the audio conveniently edited. But even they sounded hesitant, because their donors were panicking too. Phone lines in congressional offices were jammed. The question being whispered wasn't, "How do we spin this?" It was, "How much does she actually know?" Then the unexpected broke through. Noelle Sarrington, a former member of Trump's 2016 transition team, gave an on-record interview to the Sacramento Times. She claimed a now-sitting official pressured her to ignore the origins of large donations during the vetting process. "I remember asking where the money came from," Sarrington said. "I was told not to dig, that it was already cleared. Looking back, I think it ties into all this, and I'm done staying quiet." Her testimony didn't go viral immediately. But for those paying attention, it confirmed one thing. Jasmine wasn't alone anymore. Inside the West Wing, aides started whispering about the Vic tapes. The president was said to be livid. According to one insider, Trump ordered a legal sweep of all internal communications tied to strategic futures. He also reportedly told his legal team, "Find leverage on Crockett." That same day, Jasmine's office received 5 anonymous threats. The fear was real, but Jasmine didn't flinch. That evening, she released a public statement. "I will not be intimidated. This is not about politics. This is about power. Who thinks they're too rich, too protected, too important to ever face consequences? The American people deserve the truth. All of it." Support swelled. But the question gripping D.C. wasn't whether Jasmine had the evidence anymore. It was, would anyone she named turn first? By Monday, something had shifted, not just in Washington, but nationwide. Outside the Capitol, a crowd of 60 gathered quietly with handmade signs. Some read, "Ask about Frame." Most didn't say anything. It's just Jasmine in bold paint. By the afternoon, the number had doubled. In Des Moines, Seattle, Tucson, Charleston, small groups appeared outside federal buildings holding the same signs and asking the same question: why is no one in jail? Who buried this? Who else knew? Jasmine's team hadn't organized a single rally. The people came on their own. Back in D.C., her office was overwhelmed. Staffers triage, non-stop. Voicemails, emails, press requests, letters from veterans, retired teachers, single mothers, even a few conservative former donors. And then came the firestorm online. Clips of the Vic recording erupted across TikTok and Instagram, fueling a digital wildfire. One creator used the quote, "The hill will burn," over campaign footage of the very officials Jasmine had named. A retired accountant in Oklahoma broke down LLCs Jasmine had mentioned, connecting 4 Nevada entities to a shadow consulting firm involved in a 2022 education grant. Her thread caught fire, picked up by ProPublica, and cited on MSNBC the next morning. People weren't waiting for CNN or Fox anymore. They were doing the homework themselves. And the White House. They were flailing. A press release tried to contain the damage, while Congresswoman Crockett is entitled to her opinion. The president stands by the integrity of his staff and appointees. It said nothing about the memo, nothing about frame, and nothing about the recording. Too late. By Tuesday, a Pew Research Center poll showed 62% of Americans cross party lines. Found Jasmine's claims credible and deserving of a full investigation. That same day, the Department of Justice quietly announced an internal review into alleged financial irregularities related to judicial recommendations. They didn't mention Epstein. They didn't mention Jasmine. But everyone knew why it was happening inside Congress. The tremors began. 3 officials linked to the Strategic Futures Fund were quietly pulled from nomination pipelines. One judicial nominee withdrew, citing personal reasons. Another, whose name appeared in a bundled donation with Lawrence Trent, denied wrongdoing, then stepped down indefinitely. And in the middle of the chaos, Jasmine didn't chase. A headline. She was spotted at a quiet diner in Arlington, sipping coffee with her legislative director. No cameras, no team. Just a notebook, a pen, and a sealed envelope under her arm. A blurry photo snapped from a distance and posted anonymously went viral, not because it revealed anything new, but because she looked unshaken. Some compared it to Watergate. Others invoked the 9/11's hearings. A few even mentioned Rosa Parks, a comparison Jasmine herself would likely reject outright. But for many watching, it was undeniable. She had done something rare. She told the truth, plainly, without shouting. And when the machine came for her, she didn't flinch. And yet, she hadn't even addressed the question that now hung over every hallway in Washington. What happens if someone from inside the administration breaks ranks? It wasn't just social speculation anymore. Legal analysts were breaking it down on YouTube. Network anchors were devoting full segments. Podcasts spent entire episodes mapping Epstein's inner circle to current federal appointments, using Mitchell appointments, using Mitchell Kest, using Mitchell Can't, using Mitchell Cast, leaves us long-lasting color. Network last cast caller. Network anchors were devoting /callers. Mitchell color /spent. A cow list spent. The // My life, it's so. We seek. We see. We oncast it. We see with as it. But to see it. Go to be as at. We can add, like. Jasmine's documents as a guide. She never claimed to have every answer. But she'd asked the one question no one else would touch, and the country was listening. But while the pressure built inside the Capitol, Jasmine was about to face her most personal moment yet. It started quietly. No press release. Number? Media tip-off. Just a plain typed note, hand-delivered to her office by a Capitol staffer. She didn't recognize the letterhead. It wasn't from a committee, not a law office. It was from Robert Dillon, the same man she'd just named on the record. The man listed under the alias R. Delaney on multiple flight manifests. The man whose name sent a ripple through the hearing room the moment she spoke it aloud. The note was brief, clinical. Congresswoman Crockett, I respectfully request a private meeting to clarify a series of inaccuracies that may have unintentionally caused reputational harm. I believe clarity may serve both the institution and the country. Our DHERT team was split. Half said, ignore him, he's fishing. He wants to know how deep you're digging. The other half said, go, let him talk. Record everything Jasmine chose. To meet not out of trust and not expecting remorse, but because she knew. Fear has a sound. And she wanted to hear it up close. The meeting was set for 8:45 p.m. In a secure conference room on the second floor of the Rayburn House office building. No phones. No cameras. She brought only her chief counsel, who sat 3 feet behind her. Dylan arrived alone. He looked thinner than on TV. Hair disheveled, tie loose. He didn't sit at first, just stared, like he was seeing someone he used to underestimate. I didn't come to argue, he said. I came because I think it's all falling apart. And no one saying it out loud. Jasmine said nothing. She waited. He sat. I was at the Sarasota meeting, he began. I thought it was a policy dinner. But when I saw Vic Frayne there, and a few others, I knew I shouldn't have. Come. Her counsel began to speak, but Jasmine raised a hand. Let him talk. They weren't discussing damage control, Dylan continued. They were planning how to go after you. Smear campaigns, leaks, feeding anonymous tips too. Media, some of it's already out there, I'm sure. It is, Jasmine said. He nodded. I didn't stay long. Said I had a flight. I didn't want to breathe the same air as those men for more than 10 minutes, but I didn't say anything either. That's on me. She looked him in the eye. Did you take money tied to Frayne? He hesitated. Looked down. Yes. Why? Because I thought no one would ever check. The silence stretched. It was laundered through LLCs, third-party vendors. The lines were fuzzy by design, and it wasn't just me. It's bigger than you know. Then give me names, Jasmine said, not impressions. Names and actions. I can't, not without protection. I have a wife, kids. Jasmine leaned in. So did some of Epstein's victims. He winced. I'll testify, he said. But not alone. If I go down solo, they'll bury me. Jasmine stood. You won't be alone, she said, but you will be held accountable. As she left the room, her counsel close behind. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. The moment had already shifted by the time she reached her office. News had broken. 2 senior staffers tied to strategic futures were now on administrative leave. One had retained legal counsel. The other had reportedly left D.C. destination unknown. The pressure was real. And so was the backlash. That night, Jasmine received her 6th direct threat since the hearing. Her security detail was increased again. She kept working, because for every threatening call meant to silence her, 20 more came in just to say thank you. One was from a retired teacher in Kansas, another, a military widow in Nebraska, a third, a former judge in Oregon. Keep going. They all said, we're watching. But Jasmine knew this wasn't the end. Not until the voices silenced for decades echoed through the chambers of power. And that echo? It was coming. The hearing room was fuller than usual. Not with press, not with cameras, but with people. Seniors sat shoulder to shoulder in folding chairs. College students lined the back wall. A group of school teachers from Akron, Ohio had driven all night just to witness what they'd only heard in whispers. It wasn't excitement that filled the air. It was something heavier, like a room bracing for a reckoning. At 9:04 a.m., Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett entered. No entourage, no spectacle, a navy blazer, no jewelry, one folder in her hand, not 3, just 1. This wasn't about dropping another bombshell. This was about making it official. She sat, adjusted her mic, and spoke with clarity. "Mr. Chairman," she began, "I move that this committee formally request the Department of Justice to open a full investigation into the activities of the Strategic Futures Fund, its donors, and its known affiliates, based on the financial documents, audio recordings, and whistleblower testimony already submitted into the record." Dead silence. Then a cough. Some paper shuffling. A Republican aide leaned in to whisper. But Jasmine didn't pause. "This isn't about politics," she said. "It's about power, and the lengths people will go to protect it." She paused, steady. "Over the last 4 weeks, I followed financial trails, tracked meetings that were never meant to be public, and spoken names that were never supposed to surface again. I did it knowing the consequences, knowing the danger. And I didn't come here to break Washington. I came to remind it who it works for." A ripple moved through the room, but she didn't break. She didn't smile. "We are not conspiracy theorists. We are not chasing shadows. We are presenting hard evidence that individuals with wealth and institutional protection conspired actively or passively to keep themselves beyond the law." Then she did something unexpected. She turned off her mic, not for drama, not to storm out, but to yield the floor. For the next 20 minutes, one member after another spoke. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Some spoke carefully, some spoke with fire, but the tide had turned. Representative Jonah Kirsch of Wisconsin put it plainly: "We spent too long pretending the story ended with Epstein. It didn't. It just got quieter until now." The vote was set for the following day, but the story didn't wait. That afternoon, Robert Dillon submitted a signed affidavit. He confirmed his use of a pseudonym for travel, admitted to accepting money routed through FRAIN-linked entities, and detailed how at least 2 judicial nominees were invited to secret meetings by 4 p.m. The Department of Justice released a statement. They were reviewing all submitted materials for criminal liability by 6:30. A second whistleblower came forward, through a Philadelphia law firm claiming to possess communications between My Only Lipstick, Ruby Kiss, Ruby Kiss, Ruby Kiss, only Ruby Kiss, has the luxurious kiss, more. Strategic Futures executives and White House officials. The phrase donation cleansing was in the subject line. The media scrambled. CNN called it a ticking clock. MSNBC ran it live. Even Fox News broke format, airing a full breakdown of the donation trails Jasmine had outlined weeks ago. And Jasmine, she didn't take a victory lap. She went home. Her staff told reporters she was spending the night alone, reading letters from constituents she'd asked them to print every one. There were hundreds. Some were a few lines. Others, pages long. One stood out from a woman in Baton Rouge. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. My daughter died before Epstein was ever arrested. She was 14. No one believed me. No one listened. I think maybe now they will." Jasmine, read that one twice, not because she needed more resolve, but because it reminded her why she never looked away. The truth doesn't blink. It doesn't always shout. It doesn't always trend. Sometimes it just waits quiet, steady in the hands of someone who refuses to flinch. And that day in Washington, Jasmine Crockett didn't blink either. Not once. If you believe the truth still matters, you believe. Elected leaders should fight for it. Subscribe, because this story isn't over. And when the next chapter begins, we'll be right here, reading every word.